Hey, welcome to the, wow, we haven't done one of these shows for a couple of weeks, took a week off, and this is the Good Morning Show where we try and, inspire you with some interesting news you can use, ideas and tips and tools. So today is no exception. And you're probably looking at the screen right now and you're going, there's two David Cohens. And will the real David Cohen stand up? No, okay. My guest today shares my same name, and the other David Cohen has a passion for aligning company people practices within company culture and the company's strategic plans. He continues to link the people side of the business with the strategic business plan, making the people initiatives, business activities that produce results through increased customer service, safety, quality, productivity, and profitability. He's been told that his ideas are often counter to many of the popular viewpoints, earning him the reputation of being a contrarian consultant. In addition, he's called upon to coach individuals at the leadership levels of many organizations. Much of his work focuses on working with executive teams, facilitating conversations that bring clarity to the values through articulation of behaviors. He continues to work on the implementation and integrating people management processes in the areas of behavioral competencies, behavioral interviewing, performance management, high potential identification, and employee and leadership development, plus succession planning. Articulation of corporate values and vision, the development of behavioral competencies, behavioral interview design, and training performance management processes, plus a dialogue for accountability, succession planning, talent management, coaching, and team building. And that's what this other David Cohen does. David, welcome.
Thank you. Do we have any time left after that?
Yeah, no, we're done. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, David.
Yeah, thank you. It was really good being here. So like everything these days, and you and I were talking about it just before we pushed record, how we're doing business has changed from new policies on how people can be let into a store to wearing protective masks to hours of opening, and thus companies having to, realign their vision and values and missions right now. Who's leading, in your estimation, as far as companies that are shining in being people focused right now? Like, who's doing a really good job that you're noticing and you're going, hey, this company's they're doing the right thing?
There's a number of companies I think that are doing it. I mean, it's interesting that some of the companies that stand out would be a company like Starbucks, who has gone as far as the chairman sending out a letter to all their employees that say, if you don't feel comfortable coming to work, don't come to work and we'll still pay you. They have gone out of their way. They were one of the first to empty out the chairs, the seating in their stores, and they're really focused on their employees. But that sets with, their previous CEO who put in place the culture, and his thrust of all of his work was around human dignity. So they were the first in the US to give same-sex health insurance benefits. They pay for an undergraduate degree for anybody that is 20 hours a week or more. They do a lot of things that other companies don't. And when he's always criticized, or they've been criticized in the past for doing it at the expense of the shareholder value, they say there's certain things that are more important than shareholder value.
Yeah, and they also kind of led the way around, racial.
Yeah, when they had the incident in Philadelphia, their response was very much in line with their value set. We screwed up, the manager screwed up. President got on the plane with 3 other executives, flew into Philly the next day, met with the 2 gentlemen, and he has offered 2 very senior people in the organization to help them with their business plan, their business, and he's also funding them to go to Wharton School to get an MBA. So, they turned around and said, we screwed up. So what they did is they closed down all the stores first in the US and then a couple of weeks later in Canada. And when I was at a conference last year, and one of their founders spoke, and somebody asked what was the impact. He said, in that half day that we closed, or the day we closed the stores in the US, they lost $60 million in revenue. Sounds like a lot of money, he said, but it's nothing in comparison to the embarrassment and not treating people right. Other places, I have a pharmaceutical company in Europe that I've worked with in the past, who has sent out, their CEO globally sent out to 50,000 employees an email saying to them that this is a situation where we are going to freeze hiring. However, we're also going to freeze layoffs. And so during this period of time, at least till September 1st, and maybe beyond, we don't want anybody worrying. And if you're a single parent and staying at home and you have children to take care of, that's going to be your priority over work. And we all understand that. And so there are organizations out there, large and small. I mean, you see every day in various YouTube videos, and you see on the news about the small mom and pop shops that are doing wonderful things for their employees to try to keep whole. But their large corporations are also doing a lot of things. And you're not surprised under these circumstances who they are, because they are living their values. They're doing the right thing. And now you combine that with the entire, Black Lives Matter movement. You see those companies that are really stepping up and doing the right thing, not because it's good for business, but because it's the right thing to do. And those are the ones that are going to sustain the message beyond the current situation, the current unfortunate reality.
I read an article last week saying that a lot of people are now considering self-employment as an option, and just due to the job market right now. If you're starting a company, or you're shifting gears with your business, whether you're a solopreneur or a company that's got a few employees, how important is it to start to create a new value system, and how important is it for you to draw on creating values, draw from your employees and your customers to have a good set of values that you're going to operate from?
I think it's a really interesting question, because there's a lot of, quote, HR gurus out there that I disagree with, apropos being the contrarian consultant, I guess. First of all, our personal values and our business values should be one and the same. You're not going to do something at work and do something different at home, because if you do something that's counter to your values at work, you're going to lose sleep at night anyhow and worry about it. And if you've always behaved that way and suddenly are behaving a different way, and your employees are being surprised by it, they're not too happy. So let's first understand from my perspective what a value is. It's a strongly held belief that's emotionally charged, resistant to change, universally applied. So you can't have, let's say, 4 values and say, well, in this situation, this value takes precedence, and I'm going to do something that goes counter to your other values. You've got to act consistently with all your values, and if it's out of line with one of them, you shouldn't do it. However, you bring up an interesting point, or 2 other points I want to address. Mm-hmm. One is the current situation. Now, we know that values evolve over time, very slowly. Any organization that's going to come in and say, we're going to change your culture, change your values, and they put a big hoopla together and a whole change management process, it's like a rubber band. As soon as the effort's gone, they snap back to their old values, because values can't change at will. Apropos of that, we also know that there are things that do change values almost overnight. And those are considered significant emotional events. And a significant emotional event is something that hits you at your very core. And in this reality that we're in right now, there are 2 of them going on. There's a COVID situation, and there's the situation with the Black Lives Matter movement. And in both cases, it's causing an awakening for most people at least COVID's causing an awakening for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So as a result of that, you might sit back and say, yeah, I want to do things differently. I want to refocus my business. I want to take a new direction. I want to do something different. But you got to ask yourself why. And if you ask yourself why and you get an answer, I'd say ask yourself why again. So why do I want to change my business? Well, because things are going on in the world that have changed my perspective. Well, why has your perspective changed? And if you keep asking yourself why at the end of every conclusion, you'll break it down to understand the motivation, the value, and see if your values have actually changed. Because if your values have changed, your behaviors have to change along with them. Because the only way I, as an outsider, can define your values or observe whether you're walking the talk, as the slogan goes, is how you're behaving, not what you're saying. Because a lot of people say one thing and do something else.
Mm-hmm.
And they can only get judged by what they do. And so in answering that, it comes internally. The other part of your question does relate to what a lot of very large name, big name HR consultants who say that your values should reflect your customers. I want to go back to Starbucks. So when Howard Schultz was questioned, that is, after they put in same-sex marriage benefits, at the shareholder meeting that followed, he was questioned by a gentleman on how come he wasn't putting money back into the bottom line. And how come he wasn't putting, more worried about the shareholders? And he said something really interesting. He said he's worried about his employees. And he said, respectfully, if you don't like my policy, please take your money and go somewhere else. But remember, from last year to this year, our stock's gone up 35%. Now, there's an entire understanding, there's a customer experience. That customer experience is going to be based on your employee experience. Your employee experience is going to be based on how you as a leader in the organization treat your employees. So if you want your employees to treat your customers well, then you as a manager leader have to treat your employees well. You can't yell at them. You can't berate them. You can't fire them in front of everybody. You can't do a lot of things just because a knee-jerk reaction says you want to do it in the moment, because what you do then is you lead by example, giving permission for your employees to yell at your customers. Because you've treated them that way, they turn around and treat the customers that way.
It's like your kids.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, in some cases, luckily my kids are flown the coop for a long time now, being 45 and 43 or 46 and 43. And, hopefully they don't yell at their kids, because God knows I've yelled at them at times because of my own shortcomings with my ADHD, which I never knew I had until about 15 years ago. And so now I can overcome those outburst problems. But, most of the time, don't ask my wife. So I'm going to say that if you're going to rely on your customers for your values, your customers come to you with a multitude of values. And you can adjust your values to meet your customers' values. The reason your customer comes to you is you give them a product and a service they're willing to pay for. They come to you for that service based on how you're currently being treated, or they're being treated by their employees, your employees. So if they like it and they keep coming back, it doesn't matter what your value set is. Now, in an extreme case like Chick-fil-A, if the value set is articulated as, well, we're closed on Sunday and we have this whole thing about same-sex marriage, et cetera, yeah, there are people that are not going to come to your store because of your value set. That's an extreme. That doesn't happen very often. So I would say that you first have to identify employees, your own value set, and then identify employees through the interview process that have recently demonstrated behavior similar to your own value set. Hire them and you'll get along fine. So when there's a crisis, you know they'll do the right thing. You
Yeah.
need to validate your perception of your values by talking to your employees, get them involved in the process so they own it. But it's got to start at the top.
Right. And it's, having a clear, understanding of values and communicating them to potential employees is a really good way to attract good people or the right people to your
Your
organization.
reputation in the marketplace is your employer brand. Your employer brand is a reflection on how outsiders perceive your organization.
Yeah.
So if your employee brand is driving a certain behaviors with your customers, then your employer brand will be a reflection of that. So, and the best way of finding that out is going to Glassdoor and seeing what people are saying about your company that currently work there. And if they're not saying great things, you got to ask yourself that question, why again?
Yeah. And what do we need to do? We talked about companies that are doing well. Who's failing at not valuing their people and their customers right about now?
I don't want to mention any names, but there are companies out there that are focused first and foremost. Let me put it this way. There are three kinds of companies out there. The ones that don't really care about their employees, and in turn, their employees are not necessarily caring about their customers, are those leaders who are worried about the current situations, and it's a woe is me, Chicken Little, the sky is falling, and what am I going to do? And everything is happening to them. There's a second set who's focused on short-term thinking. What am I going to do to stay afloat? What am I going to do to make ends meet? And how am I going to do that? And they're laying off staff. Well, in both cases, they're laying off staff usually. They're not sacrificing their own income for the sake of their staff. They're doing a lot of things that are really self-centered. And then there's those that are looking at this as an opportunity. And the opportunity, it's a really important one, whether you're a small firm or a big firm, there's a lot of processes and procedures that you go through. There's a lot of activities that are routine and daily. And those companies that are really positive about it are saying to their employees, you've always thought about ways of improving, we haven't listened. Now's the time to come up with as many ideas as you can to make sure that we improve them now to make things work better. So when we go back to work, we don't fall back in our own old patterns. So there are companies, and there are some big companies, some small companies that are not taking care of their employees, or not asking. And there's even big companies. I would say that there's two questions that every leader should be talking to the frontline staff about.
Mm-hmm.
They should skip everybody else and talk to their frontline staff about, who are at home and worried. They should ask two questions. How are you doing? And is there anything I can do to help? And then respond accordingly. Because I have already talked to people on the front line at various organizations, large and small, and everybody's having these Zoom coffee clutches, and they're having these fun activities and all these employee engagement experiences, which don't really amount to too much. Never have, never will. What they're doing, however, is they're remembering how they're treated. And so the CEO gets up and has a town hall meeting on Zoom and talks about how we want to treat everybody, we care about everybody. And then when you have your team meeting on Zoom or Teams or whatever it might be on, all of a sudden your supervisor's under pressure to get results because they're worried about staying afloat. And they start to micromanage you, berate you, do things. Well, you're not going to remember what the boss said. You're going to remember how your manager treated you. So it'd be very interesting. One company in California I was talking to, so I suggested what they do is they have all their HR business partners, senior leaders, talk to frontline staff and ask if their manager has asked them how they're doing and what the manager's done about it. Ask them, ask them those 2 questions to start. How are you doing? Anything I can do to help? Have you shared that with your manager? What's your manager done? And then follow up and make sure something gets done. And I think that what they would then find out is those supervisors that really are being detrimental to the employee experience, and they have to deal with it. If they don't deal with it, they might find out that employees don't come back. Because it's surprising, it's interesting what you said. I was talking with a firm here in town that deals a lot with, they're in a cloud business, so they need programmers like crazy. Before the shutdown, they had 100 open positions.
Hmm.
I asked them, well, what are they doing to recruit right now? And the person's response was, oh, the leadership put a hiring freeze on. And I said, that's really going to be embarrassing, because right now, the really good firms realize that that's happened. And so they're going after, based on reputation, some of the best people in the business and hiring them. Because I've seen everybody from very senior positions to frontline staff talk about changing jobs in the last 2 months, starting new jobs. Well, that didn't happen because the interview process started in February. That happened because the interview process started in mid-March, which was after the close down. So there are companies that are out there looking. And, there are a lot of interviews going on right now on Zoom and, distance, coming in, having a face mask. I had one of my students from Durham College. She talked to me about going into an interview at a brokerage. And they told her, wear a face mask, wear gloves, etc., how the interview was going to be conducted. And it was at distance, a distance. It was a good 10 feet separation. But they're interviewing and they're hiring. So if you naively think that your staff is safe because everybody needs a job when this is over, yeah, they don't need a job, but they already have it someplace else. If you're not treating them right, you're not paying attention to them, and you got to be looking to fill in those holes.
Yeah. So, we talked about this prior to today. Managing people is a challenge right now too, as we did chat offline prior to today. Meetings and work is being done remotely, and when change happens, nerves get frazzled, dynamics change. You're at home working, you're managing kids, maybe you got some home issues.
The kids are doing math way above your level.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Work expectations also come into questions. And you indicated also prior to today that management does need to be mindful of the state of well-beingness, motivation, and job satisfaction. And it's probably now more important than ever. So 2 questions. What measures can be put into place to ensure retention and engagement while the team is off-site working from home?
All right, first question, how to measure that?
Or what measures can ensure retention and engagement?
Well, the measures for retention are usually lagging indicators, but I think that if you ask people how they're doing, if you ask people, what can I do to help? And they meant,
Yeah, I got your screen up.
oh yeah. If they mentioned something, I was just one blank, what happened? If they mentioned, that's changing by the way this week. I'm putting up a new website this week.
Oh, good.
So if they mention something, you got to follow up. Don't hold out that carrot of saying, I care about you and I want to, ask you the question, and then just leave them there hanging there without responding to them. So one thing you do is people know when you genuinely care about them. And when you respond with empathy, when you respond with caring, where you give them support, right now from a psychological point of view, I believe that employees at all levels, because of the loss of a lot of things, are going through something very similar to grieving. And that grief is devastating. Anybody who's ever lost a family member knows that that grief can paralyze you for a long time. And employers have to understand the grieving process that their people are going through and ask them questions. Because if you can establish an emotional relationship with your staff and they know that you've supported them, they will be the last ones there in years from now to turn off the lights.
Hmm.
So, I mean, I've got examples of that go way back at different companies of people who have helped their employees during a life crisis with that employee. And those, in one case, I know of an employee that came back from being supported with one of their children, which was desperately sick. And he didn't miss a day of work for 17 years.
Hmm.
And when he did miss the one day, it was like he gave his family a hard time. He wasn't going to work that day. And he was in a manual laborer job, but the company treated him the same way they would treat an executive who was going through a similar crisis. And everybody responds accordingly. So that's what organizations have to do now. They have to understand that people have an emotional need. It's akin to grieving. It's definitely anxiety, and people have to respond accordingly.
Yeah, you're right. And we're grieving so much. We're grieving the loss of, I guess, normalcy or routine. We're grieving the loss of, geez, I can't go to the movies, or baseball's not on. I know it sounds
my
sort of
kids can't go to school,
but or the kids are grieving. They're not in school with their buddies.
My grandson is grieving right now. He's a freshman in high school.
Yeah.
And he loves school.
Yeah.
But it's also a refuge for him to get away from everything else going on in his life.
Sure.
And he can't go. So he's decided to take a summer class in August, because by the time he signed up for summer classes in Toronto, the July classes are already full. Now they're still going to be virtual, but he wants to do it because it gives him some sort of connection with the world.
And he's engaged. So, we really are in drastic time as far as results go, bottom lines, and the numbers are concerned. Yet we're in such a time of flux, change, and uncertainty. When these two meet, the need for numbers and bottom lines, there's going to be some gnashing of teeth and fireworks. What's your take on this? And what's occurring potentially there that concerns you down the road when the bottom lines aren't met and the stock?
Well, the bottom line, see, I've the buzzword in business a couple of years ago was VUCA. Everybody talked about VUCA.
Which was?
And I did a whole activity around how to survive in difficult times. It's to live your values. And if you live your values, you'll do the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
So if you live your values, you'll be able to make decisions that help you sleep well at night. Because if you don't make those decisions, there's going to be stress, tension, and surprises, and the anxiety in your organization is going to go up. So I would say know your values, live your values, and don't do anything short of that. Because if you do, you're going to have a problem. So if the bottom line is starting to crash, then you got to look at, how do I engage my people? How do I ask them? It's really interesting. I mean, a lot of people bring in consultants like myself and others who then talk to your frontline staff who come up with great ideas. And then we share those ideas with leadership when leadership should have been talking to the frontline staff to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
But, they don't have the PhD. They don't have the degree from, an MBA. Many of them maybe barely graduated high school. But I got news for you. The School of Hard Knocks is a better teacher than anything else.
I agree.
And a degree really, a degree is something which is important. A degree is something which, helps you see things perhaps differently than you would have, but so does life. And so asking your frontline staff on what are we doing that we can do differently? How do we change it? Gets back to what I talked about before. This is a great opportunity for you to talk to your frontline staff at home and say to them, listen, our processes have to change in order for us to make, to do business more smartly, better, and protect our bottom line. Listen to them, ask them now. So when you go back to work, it's not an issue.
Yeah. What's the distinction between values and company culture? Because I'm on your page and you talk about strengthening culture.
Values is the DNA of the culture.
Yeah.
So the culture is reflected in rituals, norms of behavior, ceremonies, the ergonomic layout of the office. For instance, hierarchy organizations always put, and it was always a joke, you want the corner office on the top floor because you're the CEO. But if you're the CEO, how much time are you really spending in your office versus your support staff? Well, why don't you have the support staff at the window instead of inside the organization? So it's really a reflection of your value set, where you're coming. So your values drive decision making. They drive the way you treat people. They drive a lot of different things. And so the culture is the culmination of all those rituals, those ceremonies. And the way to understand them is what I call corporate legends.
Mm-hmm.
What are the stories about your employees in your company that has happened over the history of the company that have stood the test of time? It's the oral history that exemplifies when somebody did something absolutely right in a tough situation or did something wrong. So the counter behaviors would have been right. And talk about those things and understand them. So the culture is a culmination of those things. But the foundation for the culture is the values. And as I said earlier, values don't change, they evolve. So you can't change. If you change your strategy, a lot of people make a mistake and think they're going to change their culture. But they're not changing their behaviors, so they're not changing their culture.
So moving forward, companies are going to have to really, really look at this first. They're going to have to put leadership and style of leading at top. What might good leadership look like moving forward?
You ask $1 million question. So what I say is, there's no one definition of leadership. If there was, there'd be one book on leadership.
Right.
Instead of an entire library full of books on leadership. And you can go on, there's a servant leader, there's this leader, there's that leader, there's all sorts of leaders out there.
Leader of the soul.
The EQ leader, the EI leader, whatever you want to call it. So I cannot tell you that there's one leader. The best leaders are the leaders that do two things: state their belief system, their values, how they will act and how they expect others to act, and create a vision that people want to follow. And if you have no followers, you're not a leader. So the definition of a leader is, do they have followers? And followership then becomes, they are aligned with the values. They're excited and passionate about the vision. Right now, everybody's talking about the passionate organization. Well, the passionate organization is simply a synonym for a vision. Because you can have vision without action, and you're just passing time. You can have vision without action, and everybody feels good. But when you have vision and action combined, then you have leadership that will change the world.
And you can have passion, but you also need a really good idea too.
That's the vision. You have passion around that vision. That passion around that vision is what, with the right values, with the set of consistent behaviors. And it's like if somebody sang for you a song, and there's a long scientific German name, which I do not know. And if I did, I couldn't pronounce it. So there is a terminology for this. If I were to sing a song that you know well, and then I end it all, I won't sing and scare everybody.
Thank you.
And end it, believe me, and ended it before it ended in your head. subconsciously or consciously, you'll finish the song. You can't help it. That's the predictability that having a set of consistent values gives the employee. They're in a situation where they've never had a rule book before. They're in a brand new situation. They don't know what to do. Well, the values are their code of conduct. That's their ethical code of conduct. Did they live by those values? And if they did the right thing. And therefore, that's the predictability that we as human beings want.
Yeah.
And if I can give you that, you'll do really well.
Yeah. And we're living in a time of pure unpredictability on every level.
And so that's why I'm saying there's anxiety and there's grieving out there, because we are in a period of unpredictable times.
Yeah.
We are in a period of unrest and uncertainty. And the more you can give people that sense of belonging, that sense of comfort that you care about them, that you'll do something for them, then you'll win this battle and go back to work. And you might have a struggle in the beginning, but you'll survive.
I have two quick questions.
Sure.
It's going to be hard to be quick. If Gandhi was running a company, what might he do in these times? And if Moses was running a company, what would he do?
Well, Moses, it's easy. He talked to Aaron.
He took a disgruntled group out of slavery, no small feat. And all they did was complain, you know?
Yeah, no, he took a wrong turn on purpose. And it's really interesting, by the way. I mean, you look at it from a psychological point of view, that 40 years allowed a new generation of people to come in place. That's how long it takes to change a culture.
Mm-hmm.
All right? He had to change a culture. He had to change a value system. He put forth this new value system, Moses, that people said, wait a second, we kind of like the old one because there was a comfort, predictability to it. Well, the new one's going to give you more predictability. And he can talk all he wanted about the land of milk and honey. And he can talk about, all he wanted about, God will provide you children like the grains of sand at the beach. But nobody really was believing him because they were suffering. They were grieving. They were going through anxiety. And he had to take them through like a leader, a father, and give them a new sense of purpose, a new sense of vision, a new beginning. Gandhi? Well, I'm not so sure, but Gandhi probably would have been out there marching, that's for sure. Probably would be wearing a face mask. And he probably would turn to his people and say, so what do you think? Let's get through this together. Let's not make this about, blaming anybody. Let's not focus on the bad stuff. What do we do to survive? And what do we do to make life better? But, it's an interesting question.
Yeah, that's why I thought of them. Final thoughts, David. I'm just going to share your screen again. For someone listening and maybe feeling a little disempowered and disengaged at work, and maybe feeling alone in it, what can they do to shift that situation?
Well, I would say talk to your colleagues about it. Don't talk to your boss. And find out, first of all, you're not alone. It's very interesting, when we do focus groups with a cross-section of employees from different parts of the company, even sometimes different departments that are at the same level, there's this aha moment where, we thought we were the only ones that felt that way. There are more people out there feeling it. And instead of misery loves company, what can you do together to make things better? How do you bring this to senior management to let them know that life has got to improve? I also think that, you got to look at this from the perspective of optimism, gratitude, gratefulness, and say, the world is going to change, but it's in our hands to change it for the better. And therefore, whether it's the company processes and procedures that can improve, whether it is my relationship with my boss that can improve, relationship with my team that can improve. I think it'd be real interesting. I think that what you talked about earlier, some people thinking that, they can go out and join the gig economy and, go out on my own and do it. They're going to be in for a big surprise, because that's not an easy thing to do.
Not right now.
As you and I know,
Yeah.
even before this.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of people doing it. So you've got to have a plan, you've got to have a passion, and you got to have at least 8 months of salary to back you up.
Yeah.
So if you don't have all three of those, if you have the passion, you have a plan, and you've got and cast iron stomach, you don't need the 8 months. But most people that I talk to, that when they go out on their own in the consulting world, they all of a sudden, after that contract they got as a severance package with their existing company disappears, woe is me, because I forgot to develop new business.
Yeah.
So I'd be real careful about that.
Yeah. Where do we get a hold of you? And I just want to thank you for this today.
You get a hold of me at david@sagltd.com or at 416-650-9786 or david@sagltd.com.
Okay.
And
the website's going to change.
And the website's going to change. It's going to have a new name. I've given up the name Strategic Action Group.
Wow.
E.S. Cohen Associates.
Okay.
So things are different.
Good.
So when you see the new website, you'll see a new name.
Okay.
Okay.
Good stuff, man. Thank you.
Thanks for inviting me, David. Much appreciated.
It was a real joy. Like I like these kind of interviews, and believe it or not, I've got a real passion for leadership and as well.
I know you do.
Yeah.
I know.
So I really appreciate this.